Erev Pesach, Shabbos, Shabbos Erev Pesach, Erev Pesach Shecholios b'Shabbos is the terminology in the Talmud. This year we have a unique 3-day Yom Tov in the diaspora to kick off the holiday, one in which even Israelis have a second day, and that is the fact that Erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan, falls on Shabbos. And some people, it's like earlier this year because it happens at the same time. We had Purim on Friday. We had the 3-day Purim conversation that we spoke about in Jerusalem. And there are certain aspects of these commemorations which go viral. I think if you recall, on Purim on Friday, the terminology on everyone's lips was Pares Mapa Umakadech, which was the idea of turning your Friday Purim Suda in the afternoon and combining it and doubling it up into a Purim Suda by getting things started and breaking and continuing, etc. We spoke a little bit about it. Some people love it, some people hate it, but that's what went viral for the Purim on Friday. And I think that when we talk about Erev Pesach Shabbos, everyone's talking about, okay, so what do you make your hamotzi on? How do you do it? How do you have bread? You can't have matzah, et cetera, et cetera. I think really the conversation especially focuses on Sudah Shlishit, the third Shabbos meal. It's interesting that most people aren't so concerned about Shalosh Shudas the rest of the year, but on Erev Pesach Shabbos, everyone all of a sudden has to have multiple Shalosh Shudases, and we'll unpack everything. There are certain technical things to keep in mind, but it doesn't really have to be all that complicated. In source number 1, you have just a blur from Halachapedia, which, as the name implies, is a Wikipedia for Jewish law, which really summarizes the issue. Infrequently, Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbat. It will occur next in 2025, it's this year, and then not again until 2045. So make sure you save the source sheets for 20 years from now. When this happens, the mitzvot of the days before Pesach are rescheduled so that it's possible to prepare for Pesach, while at the same time properly observe and respect Shabbat. The specific halachic issues at play are how to have Shabbat meals while juggling the prohibition to have matzah on Erev Pesach and the prohibition to have chametz after the 4th hour on Erev Pesach. Sudah Shlishi presents a unique challenge, since it ideally is a hamotzi meal in the afternoon, but both chametz and matzah are forbidden, so what are you supposed to eat? Another topic is when to do the search, the bedika, and the bior, the burning, considering they cannot be done on Shabbat. Lastly, selling the chametz can occur, but the mechanism of the sale has to be altered to take place before Shabbos or complete the acquisition before Shabbos and stipulate the sale goes into effect on Shabbos. Usually we sell the chametz on Erev Pesach. Well, Erev Pesach is on Shabbos. We're not supposed to do business on Shabbos. Also, if you sell the chametz before Shabbos, what about any chametz you keep on Shabbos? So all of these things have solutions, but it does complicate things a little bit. And the whole idea of Erev Pesach on Shabbos has a very unique Talmudic discussion, not so much because of our specific issues that were just raised in terms of the chametz and the searching and the burning and everything like that, but just the concept in general. Remember that this was a time when the temple stood, they would have to bring the carbon Pesach on Shabbos. And the Talmud records in source number 2, it's a selection from Pesachim 66a, that they got confused. What do Erev Pesach on a weekday, you could do anything that you want. There's certain rules and regulations for the timing and the procedures for bringing the Paschal sacrifice. As I always point out, we'll probably read a headline from Israel that usually in Erev Pesach, there's someone who very much feels you can, and we've discussed this before, can bring sacrifices today and wants to bring the carbon Pesach even in these days and brings his lamb to the entryway to the Temple Mount and says, I want to come in and bring a sacrifice, and they arrest him. And it's an annual protest. I wonder how it will take place this year. We'll have to wait and see what the headline is. But here it seems that this idea of Erev Pesach Shabbos caused a lot of confusion. So let's look in the selection. Sages taught with regard the eve of Passover that occurs on Shabbat. So they're talking about Erev Pesach on Shabbos. This law was forgotten by the sons of Becerra, who were the leaders of their generation. Okay, the rabbis didn't know. The 14th of Nisan once occurred on Shabbos. They forgot and did not know whether the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not. Do we bring the carbon? Do we not bring the carbon? So they said, is there any person who knows whether the carbon Pesach overrides Shabbos or not? Carbon Pesach doche Shabbos. So can you bring it or not? So what do you think before we go further? Or do we know the answer? Should the carbon Pesach be brought on Shabbos? Sure. You have to bring a sacrifice is brought on Shabbos, so you have to bring the carbon Pesach on Shabbos. You don't bring the carbon Pesach on the 13th. You can't bring it on the 15th. It's prescribed for the 14th of Nisan. You should bring it. So anyway,
but you can't cook it on Shabbos.
No, that's not what they were wondering. They were wondering, should you even bring it?
Yeah.
So, so they said, is there anyone? So they said, is there any person who knows the answer? So we'd be able to provide the answer. So there was a certain man in Jerusalem who came up from Babylonian. Hillel the Babylonian is his name. At one point, he served the two most eminent scholars of the generation, Shmai and Naphtali, and he certainly knows whether the Paschal Lamb overrides Shabbat or not. I got a guy for you. He knows the answer. Hillel. So the Bnei Beseira sent messengers and called him. They said, do you know whether the Paschal Lamb overrides Shabbat or not? He said to them, have we but one Paschal Lamb during the year that overrides Shabbat? Do we not have many more than 200 Paschal Lambs, i.e. sacrifices during the year that override Shabbat? He's like, it's obvious. We have plenty of sacrifices that are brought on Shabbat. They said, how do you know this? He said, well, it says the word, its appointed time is stated with regard to the Paschal Lamb, b'moado. Its appropriate time is also stated with regard to the daily offering. Just as the expression, its appointed time, which is stated with regard to the daily offering, indicates that it overrides Shabbat, you bring a sacrifice every Shabbat. The daily sacrifice is brought daily, including Shabbat, so therefore the sacrifice overrides Shabbat. So certainly, so too, its appointed time, which is stated with regard to the Paschal Lamb, indicates it overrides Shabbat. You bring the daily sacrifice on Shabbat, you're certainly going to bring the Pesach sacrifice on Shabbat. And he says it's an eighth fortiori inference, a kal v'chomer. If the daily offering, the neglect of which is not punishable by karet overrides Shabbat, if you don't do so, the punishment is not so severe. Is it not right that the Paschal Lamb, the neglect of which is punishable by karet, should override Shabbat? If you don't bring a carbon Pesach, there's a significant punishment. So when there's no punishment for not doing it, you still bring it on Shabbat or override Shabbat. If there's a significant punishment, then you certainly should do so. Whichever way you want to, whether it's because of the fact that we bring daily sacrifices on Shabbat or you like the Kal V'chomer, he says it's obvious. After Hillel brought these proofs, they immediately seated him at the head and appointed him Nasi over them, and he expounded the laws of Passover that entire day. You be the chief rabbi, you know everything. In the course of his teaching, he began rebuking them and said, what caused this to happen? That I should come up from Babylonia and become Nasi over you? Aren't there enough rabbis in Israel who should know the answers? It was the laziness that you did not serve the two most eminent scholars of generation living in Eretz Yisrael, Shmai and Naphtali. It's because you didn't properly take advantage and learn from and respect and appreciate the wisdom of Shmai and Naphtali. See, very important mitzvah, respect your rabbis. Love it. They said to Hillel, our teacher, okay, fine, you're so smart, let's go back to studying. If one forgot and did not bring a knife on the eve of Shabbat and cannot slaughter his Paschal lamb, what's the law? Okay, this connects a little bit to what Hirsch said. You're going to bring the sacrifice, but anything else you're not going to do. You can't cook it on Shabbos. Also, it's Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry things in the public domain. So what happens if you have you're walking your lamb to the sacrifice, but you forgot the knife? You don't have a knife. What are you supposed to do? You didn't bring it on Friday. Now you have to slaughter. You don't have a knife. He said to him, I once heard this halacha from my teachers, but I have forgotten it. Hillel didn't remember. But he said, Hanach lahem Yisrael, leave it to the Jewish people. If they are not prophets, to whom God revealed the secrets, they are the sons of prophets and will certainly know what to do. He said, you know what? I have faith that the Jewish people will get it right. So the next day on Shabbos was the Erev Pesach, and the Paschal offering. One who had a Paschal offering was a lamb, who had a lamb to bring it, took the knife and stuck it to the wool of the sheep. And one who had a goat, which doesn't have such thick wool, stuck it between the horns. And so they found a way to have the sheep and the lamb and the goats carry it. And Hillel saw the incident and remembered the halacha that he had once learned. And he said, this is the tradition I've received from Master Shmai of Town. That's exactly. He when he saw what the Jews did, he remembered that is exactly what Shmai and Naphtali had said to do. If you forget the knife in advance, find a way for the animals to carry it. It's not ideal, but better for the animals to carry it than to be stuck without a knife or not to be able to do it on Shabbos. So it's a very interesting story, highlighting the complexity of Erev Pesach Shabbos, not necessarily for the reasons that we're going to be discussing, but in the times where there being a carbon Pesach. It's fascinating, for it talks about the role that Hillel was able to play, as well as the fact that the rabbis forgot, and there was a law that Hillel forgot. Also, the fact that what Jews do is certainly a major part of what Jews are supposed to do. What's the halacha? I'm not sure, but I bet the Jewish people will get it right. And so, that certainly the immortal words of Tevye tradition, and the Jewish people following it, and that being an essential part of Judaism, certainly throughout much of Jewish history, is something that emerges from this. And if you are like me, you're wondering, but seriously, they could forget the halacha? So if you turn to source number 3, this is the Trumat Hadeshin, Mari Weil, writing in the late medieval German period. How can they forget something that occurred before? Right? What do you mean? This is a very bad precedent. If not for the fact that for many years it never happened that Erev Pesach was on Shabbos, they forgot it, even though it concerned the public matter. Right? The idea that the fact that it really was a long time in between. Well, we're saying now, for those who recall, this happened 4 years ago. 2021 was the last Erev Pesach Shabbos. It's not going to happen again for 20 years. So since 2021 to now, not so long, but 20 years goes by. The period in Jewish history, this is taking place, essentially tail end of Second Temple. It wasn't the easiest of times politically and economically, so socially for the Jews. So the true Hadeshin is on. So look, if you completely don't have to engage with something for so long, it's possible that even the greatest of rabbis may be able to forget. So it's a fascinating outgrowth of Erev Pesach and Shabbos about what happens if the law is forgotten, and the role of the Jewish people in restoring it, and the need for the chain of tradition to continue, et cetera, et cetera. I'll stop to take any questions from this Talmudic selection before we tackle some of the issues. Okay, so the intro to this mentioned some of the things relating to the meals on Shabbos and the like, but really, chronologically, we're going to encounter something even beforehand. So we're going to go from Thursday through the onset of the Seder, and the first thing that we encounter is what's called the Tanis B'chorim, the fast of the firstborn. There is a very strong tradition that makes its way into Jewish law that the Erev Pesach is a fast for the firstborn, the Bechorim. Unclear is if it's the fact that the Jewish firstborn were saved while the Egyptians were killed, which is a little strange because why would the Jewish firstborn be at risk of being killed also? Maybe there's an element of solidarity. Maybe it's unclear as to the origins of the tradition. There's also some indication that it wasn't just the male firstborn; it was the female firstborn that also fasts, in the different ways that the fast develops. Also, what's probably most well known about this fast is that if you ask if anyone's actually ever fasted, I think in my experience, only one person told me that he ever fasted on this day because he couldn't catch the Siyam, right? Everyone knows about the Siyam. They have a Siyam on Erev Pesach, and a tractate is completed, and at that celebration, all who participate could eat. It seems that it's not much of a public fast day. There's a discussion usually on a public fast day. If there is a million of people fasting, you have a special Torah reading, you say special prayers, the Slichot, you say the Anenu addition in the prayer. All of those are absent from this fast day because it's kind of a fast day that we don't want to commemorate, that we don't want to observe because it's Erev Pesach, and Erev Pesach has the status of a holiday. So it's a little bit inconsistent with the fasting, but the practice is there. But what are you going to do with this on Shabbos? You clearly can't fast on Shabbos. So if you look in source number 4, Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbat. Some say that one should fast on Thursday, while some say one is not obligated to fast. And the Ramasa Dominik follows the former opinion. Some say don't fast at all. No fast, no fast. and the accepted position is that we do it on Thursday. So there's a fast day that we try to get it out of anyway, which is on Shabbos when we can't fast. But since we have the fast day, we have to put it on the calendar, so you move it on to Thursday. Some feel that it's just a less observed fast day in the first place. That if you're going to get out of it anyway, you might as well make it on Friday. Source number 5, the Birkei Yosef, talks about, quotes the Shulchan Aruch and says that there were those who says, he quotes the Umaharam Provençal B'Tshuvosav Kasav de Misanim B'Yom Hashishi V'Kasa Sheken Kasa Rabbeinu Menachem LeBeis Meir, the Meiri. So there seemed to be a practice in Provençal, France, that fast on Friday. Why not? You're not going to fast anyway, so let's just why extend this Erev Pesach Shabbos thing all the way back to Thursday? Let's just take care of it on Friday. That is not the accepted idea. Part of what we go through in advance of Erev Pesach on Shabbos seems to carry on our desire to maintain consistency in the practices we have on Erev Pesach. And this we come to the idea of the chametz, right? We're going to do the search for chametz on Thursday night because we want to do the burning of chametz on Friday. So the Shulchan Aruch says in source number 6, it's good to burn the leaven on the eve of Shabbos before noon in order to avoid making the mistake in other years of burning after noon. Right, and obviously we'll talk about on the Shabbos that you nullify. Right, if we remember, usually on an Erev Pesach, the night before Pesach you search, the morning of Pesach you put away all the rest of the chametz, and then you burn. Well, here we're doing that 24 hours earlier. We're searching 2 nights before, right? Searching on the 13th, then we're burning on the 14th. And he says, but there's no reason to burn on the 14th because you still technically forget about what your own personal practice will be in terms of having chametz. I know people who are chametz free already, but the idea is, why would you burn your chametz on Friday and go through those motions if you still got 24 hours of chametz left? So you do it in order to avoid making the mistake. As it says in in paragraph 6 in source 6, even if no leaven remains in the house after the morning meal, you must nullify leaven the way you nullify in other years. And let's say on Shabbos morning, you're completely chametz free, you still say kol chamira, you still nullify your chametz because we don't want to get off track. We don't want to introduce anything different that would make things confusing in other years. Maybe similarly, that's why we have a fast in the firstborn, even though there really is no reason for it altogether. Because think about, going back to the Talmud of Pesachim. They forgot. Well, maybe you forget things when you don't keep things consistent. You don't keep things, you don't stick to the usual practice. So that's why on Friday, we're encouraging the burning of the chametz at its usual time before, I think the exact time is like 11:50 or something like that. And the idea is to burn the chametz the same way you do it any other year. When you burn that chametz, you don't have to do the bitul and nullify your chametz with the kol chamir expression because it's not yet Erev Pesach. But we go through the search, which you have to do because you can't do that on a Friday night, especially if you're using that candle and the wooden spoon, which we spoke about separately. But you can't do the search Friday, so you do the search Thursday night. And once you're doing the search, we make you do the burning, even though you're still going to have chametz. Why? We want to keep things going forward. We don't want to deviate so that we don't make a mistake. The fact that you're nullifying on Shabbos and you may have a little bit of chametz left, the Mishnah Berurah points out that here, what are you going to do with any of your leftover chametz? And this will be relevant once we start talking about having chametz into Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah mentions in the second line of source number 7, lahashlicho lebeis hakisei im yesh lo beis hakisei bechatzero. You can flush it down the toilet. Mishnah Berurah says if you happen to have your own toilet, right? Not everyone had their own at the time, but the idea is there's ways to you can get rid of your chametz. You flush the chametz, you get rid of it that way. So we're going through similar motions, even though it doesn't necessarily have the same it doesn't have the same requirements because we want to make sure we don't deviate, so we don't get confused in the future. So that's the runway into Shabbos when you have Erev Pesach Shabbos. That's the Thursday of the fast of the firstborn, even though maybe you shouldn't have it or maybe do it on Friday. Thursday is the fast, Thursday morning is the siyum, Thursday night is the search, Friday morning is the burning, even though you're not really done. So that's why you don't say the chametz is all done yet. And now we come to Shabbos. Just a word about the sale, which we won't go into as many details. We've spoken about how the sale works separately. In general, the way most people operate when it comes to the sale is they authorize someone, usually the rabbi, to arrange for the sale of the chametz, and that's really how you wipe your hands of it. You don't have to worry about it ever again. When it comes to the sale, and the same can be with the sale in any year, right? You arrange for the sale of your chametz, and and let's say wherever you are on Erev Pesach, even if it's not on a Shabbos, you have chametz that year. Still have it. You have a bowl of cereal for breakfast, or you have the last bagel for breakfast. So how does that work if you arrange for the sale of your chametz and the rabbi's taking care to sell the chametz? And very often the sale of chametz will not take place at the very last minute possible. So the sale of chametz will go into effect at that time, but sometimes it's sold earlier. So very often when the sale of chametz takes place, there's a number of stipulations that are made about some of the chametz that still might be used by the people who are selling their chametz, and some of it will be used a little bit beyond the time, but these stipulations are what usually allow for a rabbi to sell the chametz at one time, even though there are people on the West Coast who will still be using the chametz for several more hours. For those who are in Israel, rabbi has to sell the chametz early. Right? You can't sell the New York chametz the same time you sell the Jerusalem chametz in a typical year, because the Jerusalem people can't own chametz anymore. So usually a rabbi in America arranging the sale of chametz for those in Jerusalem will arrange an earlier sale. This year happens to be very different because pretty much everyone you're selling the chametz on Friday, regardless, to avoid finishing the sale on Shabbos. But it's often less an issue for the average consumer and more of a headache for the rabbi. Suffice it to say, the way the chametz is sold always involves a number of stipulations and conditions. So this is just one added condition for the rabbi to be aware of. Those who authorize me to arrange for the sale of your chametz, I gotcha. So let's move into the issues of on Shabbos itself. So just like we said, it's pretty straightforward. The Shulchan Aruch puts it, in a couple of sentences. Source number 8. When the 14th of Nisan occurs on Shabbat, we search for the chametz on the 13th and burn everything before Shabbat, and we leave over enough food for the first 2 Shabbos meals. It's talking about when you talk about enough food, we're talking about the motzi that you have to make, your Friday night meal and your Shabbos lunch meal. What about your Shal Shudas meal? Well, the timing of the third meal is after Mincha, and we're not able to have a meal with either matzah or chametz. So what you should use is matzah ashira. That's what we call egg matzah. We call it rich man's matzah because it's not just flour and water. It has fruit juice, even though, fun fact, egg matzah, no eggs. And the meal should be eaten before the 10th hour, right? So Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos. You have to have your regular Shabbos meals. Your Friday night meal is doable with chametz. Your morning meal is doable with chametz as long as it's before the 4th hour. And your Shal Shudas is going to be complicated. Can't have matzah because we don't eat matzah in Erev Pesach. Can't have chametz because it's too late. So the Shulchan Aruch says, egg matzah, that's what you can use. The Ramah points out that in our lands, Ashkenazim don't eat egg matzah on Pesach. So therefore, have some fruit or some fish or meat. Okay, third Shabbos meal, you won't wash. I said before, plenty of people don't wash most weeks, so why do they have to wash this week? So you end up with the third meal being one that doesn't have any type of bread. So let's just unpack this a little bit. So, with regards, it seems that for the Shulchan Aruch, which is codifying Jewish practice until 16th century, the expectation was Friday night Shabbos meal, Shabbos morning Shabbos meal. You're going to make hamotzi. It's not that complicated, right? You take something, you keep your chametz segregated, you make your motzi, and you be careful, and you like we saw before, you could flush the crumbs or throw it out or eat it. Everyone always says use pita bread because pita bread has less crumbs. Whatever it's going to be, you can make the appropriate arrangements. Those who are more concerned about this start introducing, maybe you can use the egg matzah. And then there's a whole discussion. Well, the Ramah says, what about we don't have egg matzah, but that's really, we don't have egg matzah on Pesach, but before Pesach it could be used. And some are very comfortable encouraging egg matzah for all the Shabbos meals. But it does seem that the expectation was Friday night Shabbos meal, Shabbos morning Shabbos meal, you make hamotzi the way you always make hamotzi. That being the case, some said, well, wait a second. Friday night make hamotzi, Shabbos morning make hamotzi, and then wait a little while. Why not have 2 Shabbos meals before the time that you stop eating chametz? So you have your, let's call it your Shabbos lunch at 8 a.m. and your Shalosh Shudas at 9:30, and you're still good to go. And that is, in fact, what some people say is appropriate. Others feel, but wait a second, which you might be thinking as well, Shalosh Shudas is not a morning meal. It's at the very earliest an afternoon meal, and usually it's towards the end of Shabbos meal. So how can that work? So they say, well, you have no choice in the matter. So it kind of becomes a competition. For Shalosh Shudas, what's most important? Is it the washing? Is it timing in the afternoon? And is there a way, if you can't do it perfectly, then don't do it. Some say, well, guess what? Egg matzah is the perfect way to do it that way. Others say you want the motzi, you want to avoid the egg matzah, so do it early. And many others just follow what the Ramah says at the end. Look, it is what it is. Have your fruit, fish, or meat at this time. And that is how that's how it gets presented. Again, a couple of sentences. It doesn't have to be so intensely difficult. Again, you have kids, maybe make them eat outside or the like. There's always going to be the complicating variables that get in the way, but at least the way from how halacha presents it, motzi at night, motzi in the morning. This leads to the fact that many shuls start a little bit earlier on Erev Pesach when it falls on Shabbos. The rabbi doesn't speak. You know, he gave the Shabbos and Gadol drasha. So now you can have you have a little it all balances out. Actually, some rabbis this year Erev Pesach is on Shabbos. Really, this is Shabbos Hagadol. Many rabbis gave the drasha this past Shabbos, but this is Shabbos Hagadol. We read the Haftorah for Shabbos Hagadol. So some rabbis are purists and will give the Shabbos Hagadol drasha this Shabbos. Sometimes they get a new shul next year, whatever. Everyone makes it work out, whatever works best for them. But this is Shabbos Hagadol, we make it work. So then there's a whole, like we said before, people really catch on to this Shalosh Shudas issue. What do you do for Shalosh Shudas issue? So one of the ones who catches on to this is the Aruch HaShulchan, right? Aruch HaShulchan, or Yechiel Michal Epstein, the rabbi of Nevada, turn of the 20th century. So he's, wants to dig down into this Shalosh Shudas issue. He says, our teacher, the Ramah, writes that we don't eat egg matzah, right? So therefore, the third meal should be eaten with fruit or with meat and fish. And it seems that his intention is not to claim that one should not eat matzah ashira on Erev Pesach, according to custom. There's no reason whatsoever for this. Rather, his intention is that since it is not our custom to eat matzah ashira, so automatically we don't prepare it among us. To prepare for just the third meal is not a reasonable expectation to go through the efforts for such a small quantity of food. Aruch HaShulchan says, the Ramah says, we don't have egg matzah, so have fish, have fruit, fish, eggs, whatever, fruit, eggs, meat, fish, meat, fruit. He says there's nothing wrong with eating egg matzah. He's saying from a practical purpose, if we don't eat egg matzah in general, you don't go through the effort of making egg matzah just to have it for Shalosh Shudas on Erev Pesach Shabbos. And so it highlights a different mentality that certainly the Ramah had in the 16th century, and the Aruch HaShulchan has at the turn of the 20th century, that avoiding egg matzah on Erev Pesach Shabbos is because we don't want you to go through the effort of making it or producing it or manufacturing it, because it's not worth it for that small amount. Right? And if nowadays you go to any supermarket with hundreds and thousands of boxes of egg matzah, maybe things would be a little bit different. But the Aruch HaShulchan is opening up an approach which is adopted and accepted by many today, that the encouraging fish and meat and fruit and discouraging egg matzah is not about the halacha of egg matzah. It's about the commercial reality of the Jewish landscape at the time. And that we're not going to make you produce egg matzah to have Shal Shodas and Erev Pesach Shabbos. And he says that we're not going to go through such efforts for such a small quantity of food. And indeed, in our land, it was customary to prepare a third meal from cooked matzah, and many do this. He points out that there's an idea of another option, which was not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch or the Ramah, that you can take cooked matzah, matzah brai, matzah meal pancakes, matzah balls, knedlach, and you can, those are whose bracha is mizonos, and if you eat enough of them, you can make hamotzion. Now, buyer beware, it's a lot of matzah. But he's saying that we even do this. We have a third piece that we make from cooked matzah. So he's saying it's an option. So the idea of egg matzah, we're not going to make you have it, but taking it to the 21st century, with it so much available, then it becomes an option. And that's why I would say egg matzah has made a shalosh should come back in Erev Pesach Shabbos. Right, so then he's getting a little technical, because why does the Rambam write fruit before meat or fish? Right? If you want to have a meal and you want to make it significant, you want to make it important, fish meat is more important than fruit. So why does it say fruit first? So he says, even though meat and fish are preferable, Sudash Lashit, that fruit, right? Nonetheless, on Erev Pesach, fruit are better, so that one does not get too full to eat matzah with appetite. We want to be careful if you're having Shal Shudas on Shabbos afternoon. We don't want you to lose your appetite and not eat matzah that night. So therefore, keep it light, keep it with fruit, and then if you don't have fruit, then you can bring in the fish and the meat. But maybe it's a gastronomical advice more than halachic advice. And while he's riffing on the subject, he says that maybe that's why no one ever mentions using matzah balls. Because let's face it, if you're trying to maintain a healthy appetite, matzah balls are not the thing to stock up on Erev Pesach afternoon and still have that appetite, because matzah balls are dense, they go down heavy. You're not going to have the appetite in the end. So the Aruch HaShulchan is kind of thinking, why don't we have egg matzah? Well, there's nothing wrong with it, but why should we go out of our way to make it? And if you're having the meal in the afternoon, keep it light with fruit, because you want to have an appetite. And that could be why no one ever made the suggestion in previous generations to use cooked matzah, matzah balls, etc., because that defeats the purpose of maintaining the appetite in the afternoon. And then he throws in as a final line, and guess what? You can always divide the morning meal into two, and some say that this works, as we mentioned before. So we're trying to juggle a few priorities. We can't eat chametz in the afternoon. We can't eat matzah in the afternoon. We want to have an appetite for the Seder, and you have to juggle this. So then you have an interesting discussion with regards to, guess what? Maybe there's no shalosh shudas. Right? Sometimes Yom Kippur, you don't have any meal. So maybe in Erev Pesach Shabbos, you don't have shalosh shudas. And they quote a Zohar. And it's that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would study Torah in place of shalosh shudas. And some say this was only in Erev Pesach Shabbos. Some say that this is the practice of the Dvar Torah shalosh shudas, and it's not uncommon in synagogues that they don't have shalosh shudas, especially in the wintertime. People just eat lunch. So instead, there's a share between mincha and marav. If you want to have shalosh shudas, eat it at home, or you could replace it with Torah, just like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And so one of the Eastern European yeshivas, they did this. It was also a function of economics. It's expensive to feed everybody another meal, so they didn't really want to have shalosh shudas, and they would try to have Torah instead. And there was the rabbi gave some Torah over, and one of the students asked a question that overturned the entire shiur. And the rabbi said, "Okay, guys, we have to go wash now, because the Torah was not sufficient anymore to be in lieu of shalosh shudas, because it's only Torah that works without question." And so they have to go wash. So what about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? What about Torah replacing shalosh shudas? So yesh lahavin. So we got to understand this. He says, do we think that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai couldn't fulfill shalosh shudas? One of the other ways. Like, why did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Erev Pesach Shabbos not do some fruit? Right. So he says, it seems to me that he clearly could have. Right. But this Shabbos, lo nitztavinu klal shalosh sudos. Even sheyev shamideh. Right? So maybe sometimes you just can't do it. Same would be this week. We have ways to have Friday night dinner. We have ways to have the Shabbos morning meal. We just don't have a way to have Shalosh. Say that eating matzah on Erev Pesach, not to eat matzah on Erev Pesach is a rabbinic rule. Right? Really, the whole idea of not eating matzah on Erev Pesach, that's a rabbinic rule. That's going to that should, in theory, be able to be overridden for Shal Shudas. Show for Lulav Shabbos, right? We allow people to sit, not do things on Shabbos because of Zed Rabbanan. So certainly we can push off the mitzvah Shal Shudas by Shevi Al Tasa. Just like on Shabbos, we tell people not to take lulav, not to blow shofar. We can tell people not to have Shal Shudas because of the rabbis making a rule. So there's no Shal Shudas to Shabbos. Even the Suda Gemara EF. And once you're not really going to do it, no, don't fake it with a bite or something small like fruit or meat or fish. It's more important on the first night of Pesach to eat the matzah with an appetite. It's interesting that Jews who are so consumed with laws about food, the only biblical eating we do as Jews is the matzah on the first night of Pesach. Maror is only rabbinic. We don't have a carbon Pesach. The Shabbos meals are all from the Nevi'im or rabbinic interpretations. The only biblical food we have is first night of Pesach, that matzah. Guess what? No Shal Shudas. This is one time, Erev Pesach Shabbos, no third meal. Call it a day. Don't get so complicated. All right. That is the Aruch HaShulchan's approach. Others say the Vilna Gaon has that type of an approach. The Kaf HaChaim, for Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sofer, points out that he quotes this as well, but he says that for Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, this touches upon that story we told about Eastern Europe yeshivas. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, second line, his Torah is sustaining. His Torah is nourishing. His Torah has spiritual substance. Our Torah is not as good, so we have to have a meal. He said, guess what might be nice? Have Shal Shudas with Torah, combine it, and that would also be very nice. So there you have the Shal Shudas discussion. We either can, find a way, 2 meals early, egg matzah, matzah balls, fish, fruit, meat, or guess what? It's okay. We're getting ready for Pesach. We can skip it for the week. So one of the other interesting rules that comes up when Erev Pesach Shabbos, less well known, I mentioned it at Minyan this morning, is that there's a custom, source number 11, to not need matzah on the eve of Pesach until after the 6th hour. So the double negative means there's a practice of making matzah on Erev Pesach afternoon, as this was the time when the Pesach offering was offered. So you talk about your matzah. It's when you take that first bite, one of the first things you're wondering is how many months ago was this made, right? So when was the matzah made? Well, some people wanted fresh baked matzah that day, but what are you gonna do on Shabbos? If the 14th of Nisan falls out on Shabbos, you should need on the eve of Shabbos after 6 hours. You make your matzah on Friday afternoon. Again, you notice that we're maintaining the same time frame, even though it's a different day, because we want to be consistent. So there were, the Vilna Gaon points out that this can't be a law, because if this was a law, then you'd have to, if you needed to have this matzah baked day of, then you'd have to bake the matzah Saturday night, the Vilna Gaon says. He never suggests you bake the matzah on Shabbos. That's prohibited. You can't cook on Shabbos. But if this was really a law that you had to have matzah, made at the time that you would have the sacrifice, in that time frame, then you would have to make it Saturday night, and that gets complicated. The Mishnah Berurah talks about this, he says in general, baking matzah the first night of Pesach is complicated for a whole host of reasons, because you have difficulty with the flour and the washing of the dishes, and imagine if after shul on the first night of Pesach you went to bake matzah. Right now, in theory, it takes only 18 minutes, but by the time you get it done, it's going to take an hour. You're going to get home. Seder's going to start late. Food's getting cold. Kids going to sleep. You're going to miss the afikomen time. You want to try to finish by midnight. It's a very complicated issue, but it does create another variable when Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos, not one that really any of us deal with as far as I know. I've never seen this practice or been involved in it, although I do wonder it would be pretty cool to get hot baked matzah and find out that tastes any different than the stuff made 3 months ago. Now, one of the other things that with Erev Pesach falling out on Shabbos is that there's a lot. The Erev Pesach can sometimes be a frenetic day. Well, when it's on Shabbos, some of that freneticism is missing. You're not burning in the morning. You're not putting things away. The same level, you're not cooking all day. And so that's why you have more time to rest. And one of the laws that does not get mentioned very specifically and explicitly is, what about your Shabbos nap helping you stay awake for the Seder? And so the Halachapedia summarized it by saying it's permitted to sleep on Shabbos in order to be well rested for the Seder. It's preferable not to say that going to sleep in order to stay up for the Seder. You can take your Shabbos nap. You can't say your nap is for the Seder because you're not allowed to prepare on Shabbos for the next day. Now, I think it's not really discussed explicitly because it goes without saying. And now the presentation is it's preferable not to say that one sleeping in order to stay up for the Seder, because there are some authorities who point out that, if you're trying to get the kids to take a nap on Shabbos and kids don't like to take a nap on Shabbos, you are allowed to tell them, take a nap on Shabbos so you'll be up later. It's kind of like a litzorech. It becomes a necessary for the kids to stay up. You're allowed to mention it. Again, it's very amorphous because, people take Shabbos naps in general. Now, what if you don't take a Shabbos nap in general? But that we'll have to have a discussion about the halachos and hashkafos of Shabbos naps, and that could be a different shir. But this more relaxed, leisurely Erev Pesach leads to, as was written in this year's OU Guide to Pesach, this year Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos. No need to panic. With proper planning, you'll have the opportunity to come to the Seder well rested, relax, and fill the mitzvahs of the evening with more feeling and greater enthusiasm. So don't let the perceived madness of what to make motzi on, what to have shalosh shodas on, don't let that get you down. Enjoy Erev Pesach Shabbos. You might just have the best Seder ever, or at least since 4 years, or the best Seder that you'll have for the next 20 years. I wish everyone a Chag Sameach. People say the expression is Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Pesach has all these kosher rules, but I know everyone here has that covered. So just have a Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Thank you.
Chag Sameach.